The bright lights of the GMA studio cut through the morning haze like beams of relentless scrutiny. Cameras swiveled, microphones hovered, and crew members bustled behind the scenes, their movements orchestrated yet frenzied, a symphony of controlled chaos. The studio smelled faintly of freshly brewed coffee, polished floors, and the tension that comes from the knowledge that millions of eyes would be watching. In the midst of it all, Gal Gadot sat poised, a figure of calm in the controlled storm, a woman whose career had been built on grace under pressure, elegance in every gesture, and a public persona meticulously curated over years in the limelight. Her rise to Hollywood prominence was no accident. From her early days in Israel to the global spotlight as Wonder Woman, Gadot had cultivated an image of professionalism, intelligence, and charm. She had faced press tours, award show interviews, and late-night talk shows, always emerging unscathed. Always measured, always in control. Yet there was a whisper of anticipation in the studio air that morning, subtle but persistent. Sense that the seemingly routine promotional segment was about to become anything but ordinary. Michael Strahan, the host, moved with practiced ease, reviewing his notes one last time. His smile was friendly, polished, and reassuring, but underneath there was a professional wariness. He knew the stakes. Live television left no room for error. One slip, one offhand comment, could turn an interview into viral fodder overnight. Strahan glanced at Gadot, catching her subtle exhale, the barely noticeable furrow of her brow, the tiny shift in posture that hinted at an underlying tension. These were small, fleeting moments, invisible to the casual viewer, but impossible for those attuned to the rhythms of high-stakes media engagement to ignore. The opening shot cut to Gadot herself, adjusting the cuff of her sleeve, straightening her back, a smile that was polished but restrained. There was a glimmer of nerves beneath the surface, a natural human reaction, though she rarely allowed it to show. The camera lingered, capturing the tiny micro-expressions, the barely perceptible tightening of her lips, the shift of her eyes. Toward the producer signaling readiness, the quick glance toward the stage monitors reflecting the countdown to live broadcast. Every detail mattered in this moment. Every nuance would be dissected by an audience hungry for drama, and by a media ecosystem eager for the slightest crack in the veneer of celebrity composure. Narration carried the weight of anticipation. For years, Gal Gadot has been the embodiment of grace under pressure. She has smiled through uncomfortable questions, deflected personal intrusions, and remained poised when others might falter. But on this morning, in the glow of studio lights and in the hum of the broadcast machinery, the unthinkable would unfold. The voiceover, cinematic and deliberate, threaded a sense of inevitability through the narrative, a slow burn, preparing viewers for the tension about to escalate. Behind the scenes, assistants whispered, checking camera angles and audio levels, while the production crew adjusted lights, ensuring Gadot and Strahan were perfectly illuminated. The air was thick with expectation, a mix of caffeine, nerves, and the subtle electricity that only comes from live television. In these final moments before going on air, Gadot's gaze fell on the set, taking in the sleek desks, the vibrant backdrop, a network of monitors showing various camera angles. Her breathing was steady, controlled, but there was a rhythm, a tension beneath the surface that spoke of anticipation and the pressure of performing flawlessly under the unforgiving gaze of millions. And then the red light blinked. Live broadcast. A subtle jolt of adrenaline rippled through the studio. Gadot straightened her posture, a practiced smile crossing her face, concealing the tension coiled beneath. Strahan greeted her warmly, the handshake brief but firm, cameras capturing every detail. The initial exchange was light, casual questions about upcoming films, charitable endeavors, and routine promotional topics. But beneath the surface, something shifted. A question delivered with the casual friendliness of a seasoned host, carried an unexpected edge. It was the kind of line that might seem innocuous, but in the crucible of live television, it had the power to provoke. Gadot's expression tightened, imperceptibly at first, then with more discernible rigidity. She answered, her words polite, measured, but with a subtle clipped edge. The camera captured the micro-expression, the fleeting tension. In her jaw, the brief narrowing of her eyes. The narration highlighted the subtle cues. What seemed like a routine morning interview was beginning to show cracks. The poised demeanor, cultivated over years of meticulous public appearances, was beginning to face its first challenge in this very moment. As the segment continued, the audience at home remained unaware of the undercurrent of tension, seeing only a smooth exchange between two familiar faces. But those attuned to the dynamics of live television could sense the electric charge building. Crew members shifted uneasily behind the cameras. Producers exchanged glances, and Strahan, experienced as he was, noticed the subtle shift in Gadot's demeanor, a slight pause before responding, a tightening of the shoulders, a barely audible sigh. These were the moments that defined live television, the thin line between controlled professionalism and the raw humanity that audiences secretly craved to witness. The narration intensified. Every gesture, every glance, every carefully measured response carried weight. In the controlled chaos of the studio, under the relentless scrutiny of cameras and the invisible gaze of millions, even the smallest reaction could become a defining moment. And for Gal Gadot, today the pressure was unlike any she had faced before. Slow-motion cuts highlighted Gadot's hands as she adjusted her bracelet, subtly shifted in her seat, and crossed her legs with precision. The camera lingered on her face, capturing the fleeting flicker of frustration and the resilience beneath it. Strahan's poised professionalism contrasted sharply, his own composure a counterpoint to the simmering tension he had begun to sense. The set lights reflected in both their eyes, the studio's polished surfaces amplifying the intensity of the moment. The narrative built suspense through cinematic pacing. In the quiet before the storm, the audience could not yet know what was coming. A routine interview, designed to showcase charm and charisma, was on the brink of becoming a defining cultural moment, an unscripted glimpse into the pressures and vulnerabilities that lie beneath the polished surface of celebrity life. Suddenly, a question landed, carefully worded but pointed in its implications. Gadot's eyes flicked toward the camera, a micro-expression caught in the fraction of a second before she responded. Strahan maintained his friendly tone, unaware of the tension beginning to surface in the subtle cues around him. The narration punctuated the moment, and in that instant, the line between professionalism and human reaction blurred, setting the stage for an exchange that would be dissected, analyzed, and replayed across the globe. Cinematic music swelled softly in the background, not overpowering the natural sound of the studio, but amplifying the audience's anticipation. The camera cut to crew members whispering, adjusting equipment, glancing nervously at monitors. The countdown of seconds before live television seemed suspended, every heartbeat magnified. Gadot took a controlled breath, aligning herself. Yet the narrative subtly conveyed the internal struggle, a celebrity accustomed to control confronting. The unpredictable immediacy of live interaction. The opening hook concluded with a lingering sense of suspense. The stage was set. The cameras were rolling. The audience, unaware of the storm brewing behind the composed smiles, would soon witness a rare and unfiltered moment. For Gal Gadot, for Michael Strahan, and for viewers around the world, this morning was about to take a turn that no one would forget. The cameras rolled, and the studio lights seemed to intensify, reflecting off the sleek surfaces of the GMA set and catching in Gal Gadot's eyes as she greeted the morning audience with a practiced smile. The segment opened with casual conversation, questions about her latest projects, the charitable initiatives she supported, and the upcoming film she had been promoting for months. On the surface, it was routine, light, and seemingly inconsequential. The kind of dialogue that made morning television safe, predictable, and digestible for millions. But beneath the surface, a subtle tension had begun to take root, invisible to casual viewers, but palpable to anyone paying attention to the nuances of human behavior under scrutiny. Michael Strahan began with his signature warmth, asking about Gadot's preparation for the film, her excitement for its release, and the way she balanced the pressures of celebrity with her personal life. Gadot responded politely, articulating her thoughts with precision and charm. Her answers were measured, her smile steady, yet there was a flicker in her eyes, a micro-expression that betrayed the tightrope she walked between charm and frustration. The camera captured every detail, the small lift of an eyebrow, the fraction of a second pause before she spoke, the subtle tightening of her jaw. In these milliseconds, the audience could sense the tension, even if they could not yet name it. The conversation seemed benign at first, but as Strahan delved into more probing questions, the atmosphere began to shift. The questions were framed innocuously, yet they carried undertones that could catch even the most seasoned professional off guard. Some critics have said that the film takes a very different approach than what fans might expect, Strahan said, his tone friendly but persistent. Gadot's lips pressed together briefly, a pause heavier than the words themselves. She answered, her tone clipped but polite, choosing her words with deliberate care, aware that any slip could be amplified and dissected across social media platforms within minutes. Her response was measured, yet the tension was unmistakable. She explained the creative process behind the film, her enthusiasm for the team she had worked with, and the importance of storytelling in her career, all while maintaining a veneer of composure that had been her hallmark. Yet Strahan's follow-up, questions though courteous, edged closer to the personal, the probing, and the ambiguous. A mention of past controversies, a subtle allusion to prior interviews, and a gentle challenge about fan expectations nudged the conversation toward unfamiliar terrain for Gadot, a space where her calm demeanor might waver. Throughout the exchange, the narration emphasized the microdynamics, the way Gadot's hands shifted in her lap, how she straightened her posture slightly, and the minuscule changes in tone that suggested rising discomfort. These cues, almost imperceptible, spoke volumes. The audience at home, particularly those familiar with Gadot's usual poise, could sense that the interview was approaching a threshold, a moment where casual conversation might give way to unfiltered emotion. Strahan, experienced as he was, noticed the change. His smile remained professional, his voice steady, but there was a subtle recalibration in his questions, a careful navigation between curiosity and confrontation. He inquired about fan reactions to her past interviews, and Gadot's response, while articulate, carried a sharper edge than before, a controlled firmness signaling that her patience was beginning to fray. She chose her words deliberately, balancing authenticity with diplomacy, aware of the stakes of live television. The crew behind the cameras began to sense the shift, their own movements becoming more purposeful, adjusting monitors, microphones, and camera angles to capture the unfolding dynamic. Every glance between Gadot and Strahan was magnified, every slight gesture analyzed for meaning. The tension was not explosive yet, but it simmered just beneath the surface, a potent mixture of human emotion and professional expectation. Narration punctuated the scene with suspense. What seemed like a lighthearted promotional segment was transforming into a test of endurance, a subtle battle of composure and control. Each word, each pause, each gesture carried weight beyond the ori. For Gal Gadot, this was no longer just about promoting a film. It was a moment that would reveal the human being behind the carefully curated public image. Strahan pressed on, asking about the creative challenges of her role, the physical and emotional demands of performing stunts, and her reflections on portraying a character beloved by millions. Gadot's responses were precise, tinged with measured passion, yet the cracks in her composure became increasingly evident. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing fractionally, her hands gesturing in a controlled, almost restrained manner. These were not signs of anger, but of rising frustration, the subtle signals that she was beginning to reach her limit with the line of questioning. A particularly pointed question about fan criticism prompted an audible intake of breath from Gadot. The camera lingered, capturing the split second where she collected herself, weighing her words carefully. Her response was firm yet courteous, a demonstration of both professionalism and a subtle assertion of personal boundaries. The narration highlighted this moment. In the glare of studio lights and under the watchful eyes of millions, Gal Gadot began to assert herself, reminding both the host and the audience that even the most polished appearances have their limits. Strahan, sensing the tension, continued with practiced skill, maintaining a tone of cordial inquiry while subtly probing the boundaries of the conversation. Gadot's composure remained intact, but the controlled energy beneath the surface was growing. The audience, even if unaware of the full stakes, could feel the rising electricity of the exchange. Each sentence carried layered meaning, each gesture a testament to the balancing act she performed between authenticity and expectation. The segment progressed with a mixture of polite conversation and rising intensity. Gadot's responses were articulate, her tone firm yet courteous, and her body language carefully moderated. But the micro-tension, the kind of friction that makes audiences lean forward in their seats, was unmistakable. The narrative underscored the stakes. Every moment on live television is a negotiation between the persona the audience expects and the emotions that simmer beneath. And as the questions became more probing, the pressure on Gal Gadot intensified, inching closer to a breaking point. Cinematic visuals punctuated the exchange, close-ups of Gadot's hands, subtly fidgeting with a bracelet, her eyes momentarily darting to the side before returning to Strahan's own composed gestures, a counterpoint to her rising tension. The studio lights reflected off polished surfaces, amplifying the intensity of the moment. The soft murmur of off-camera crew, the hum of equipment, and the distant buzz of the studio added layers to the atmosphere, reinforcing the sense that something significant was about to happen. The narration heightened suspense further. In the quiet cadence of conversation, beneath the smiles and pleasantries, a subtle clash of energy was emerging. A routine interview had evolved into a high-stakes interaction where composure, patience, and professionalism were tested in real time. For the millions watching, the tension was invisible, but for those attuned to the unspoken rhythms of live television, it was unmistakable, a moment on the brink. As the chapter neared its conclusion, Gadot's patience, while still maintained, had unmistakably begun to show signs of straying. Her responses, while polite, were tinged with firmness. Her body language remained composed, yet carried the undercurrent of rising emotion. The stage was set for the escalation to come, a slow burning tension that promised a dramatic turn in the conversation. The camera lingered on her poised form, capturing the delicate interplay between grace and frustration, control and instinct. The subtle tension that had been simmering beneath the surface now reached a critical threshold. Gal Gadot sat upright, her posture impeccably controlled, yet every micro-expression betrayed a rising frustration. The audience at home, unaware of the intricate dynamics playing out before the cameras, saw only a polished exchange between a beloved Hollywood icon and a seasoned host. But behind the smiles and smooth dialogue, the atmosphere crackled with an intensity that demanded attention. This was the moment where professional composure and human instinct would collide, and the cameras were there to capture every fraction of a second. Michael Strahan, sensing the shift, continued his line of questioning with practiced ease. But there was a subtle edge creeping into his tone, a careful prodding, a probing of territory that was simultaneously professional and personal. He referenced a recent social media controversy surrounding Gadot, a topic she had handled gracefully in the past, but that carried an undercurrent of sensitivity. The words were delivered lightly, almost conversationally, yet in the crucible of live television, they acted as a spark to tinder already set ablaze. Gadot's reaction was immediate but measured. She drew in a slow, controlled breath and responded with a politeness that masked the rising tension. "I think it's important to focus on the work itself, rather than the noise surrounding it." The camera lingered on her face, capturing the tightness around her eyes, the subtle narrowing of her jaw, and the deliberate modulation of her voice. Every gesture, every word, conveyed a layered message. Calm, yes, but underpinned by a quiet assertion that boundaries had been reached. Strahan, experienced and charismatic, attempted to navigate the shifting currents of the conversation. He probed further, lightly questioning Gadot's response to fan criticism, her handling of public perception, and her approach to media scrutiny. Each question was framed as an innocuous inquiry, yet the subtext was clear. How far would she allow the conversation to go before pushing back? Gadot's hands, resting lightly on her lap, flexed subtly as she weighed her words. Her body language, a careful choreography between civility and firmness. The narration emphasized the stakes. Live television is an unforgiving arena. Every gesture is scrutinized, every pause analyzed, every subtle inflection magnified. For Gadot, this was more than a promotional interview. It was a test of her composure, her patience, and her ability to assert herself without compromising the grace that had become her signature. As the exchange intensified, Strahan pressed on with a question regarding Gadot's choice of projects and the criticism she had received from certain corners of the media. The phrasing was neutral, yet the timing and delivery added pressure. Gadot's initial smile faltered for the briefest instant, her eyes flicking toward the studio monitors, as if seeking an anchor amidst the mounting tension. Then she responded, her voice firmer, a subtle edge beneath the surface. "I am confident in my decisions and the work I do. I stand by my choices, and I think it's important to focus on what we create, not on the opinions that can distract." From the process, the studio's atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. Crew members adjusted monitors and cameras, capturing every nuance of the interaction, while off-camera assistants whispered instructions, aware that something unprecedented was unfolding. The narration highlighted the cinematic tension. In these moments, the cameras capture more than just words. They capture the dance of human emotion, the conflict between expectation and authenticity, the friction between curiosity and personal boundaries. Every eye in the studio, every camera lens, became a witness to the subtle eruption building beneath the surface. Gadot's composure, while intact, now carried a visible assertiveness. Her gestures became slightly more deliberate, her voice more measured, and her responses edged toward a controlled sharpness. The dialogue crackled with understated electricity, a conversation on the verge of spilling over. The audience, though unaware of the full context, could sense a shift in energy, a tension that demanded attention and foreshadowed the confrontation that was imminent. Strahan, recognizing the delicate balance, attempted to steer the conversation toward lighter topics, but the previous questions had already set the emotional tone. Gadot, with a subtle tilt of her head and a calm yet firm voice, drew a line. "I appreciate your questions, but I think we should focus on what's meaningful about the work itself." The words, simple on the surface, carried weight, a quiet declaration that the interview had entered uncharted territory, where the dynamics of power, respect, and authenticity were in play. The narration painted the unfolding drama with cinematic brushstrokes, It is rare to witness such a moment on live television, a convergence of professional expectation, human emotion, and the subtle, unspoken negotiations that define how individuals present themselves under pressure. Gadot's measured assertion was a reminder that even in the spotlight, boundaries exist, and asserting them is both necessary and courageous. The camera cut between close-ups of Gadot's intense gaze, Strahan's carefully measured expressions, and wide shots of the studio, capturing the subtle shifts in body language, the slight tension in shoulders, the minute gestures that spoke volumes. The pacing of the interview had slowed, each sentence carrying more weight, each pause a pregnant moment of anticipation. The audience could almost feel the electric undercurrent that connected the two, a tension between inquiry and restraint, curiosity and assertion. As the chapter neared its climax, Strahan asked a question referencing the pressure of maintaining public image while juggling personal integrity. Gadot's response was deliberate, measured, yet unmistakably assertive. "I've learned that my job isn't to satisfy everyone's expectations. My responsibility is to remain true to myself and the projects I choose. That requires focus, confidence, and sometimes saying no when a conversation isn't productive." The camera lingered on her face, capturing the subtle interplay of determination and calm, the quiet power of someone asserting their boundaries without descending into conflict. The narration heightened the suspense. For a brief, suspended moment, the studio seemed to hold its breath. A dance of conversation had reached its apex, a delicate balance between civility and confrontation, between charm and assertiveness. And in that moment, it was clear the interview had transcended the ordinary. It had become a study in human composure, a rare glimpse of celebrity authenticity under pressure. Gadot's posture remained impeccable, but her energy had shifted, no longer merely polite and cooperative, but engaged, assertive, and self-assured. Strahan, recognizing the subtle change, adjusted his approach, his tone remaining cordial, but slightly more cautious. The tension was palpable, yet contained, like a coil wound tight, ready to spring. The narrative underscored the cinematic significance. This is the moment where the veneer of perfection meets reality, the point where the carefully constructed persona of a public figure confronts the unpredictable dynamics of live interaction. And it was here that Gal Gadot's professionalism would be tested in ways few could anticipate. A tension that had quietly simmered beneath the surface of the interview finally erupted, leaving ripples that extended far beyond the GMA studio. As the cameras cut to commercial break, the immediate reaction was subtle crew members exchanging glances, producers nodding in quiet acknowledgement of what had just unfolded, and the hum of technical equipment filling the space with a low, anticipatory energy. But outside the studio, in the vast, unpredictable world of social media and public discourse, the fallout was instantaneous, explosive, and unrelenting. Clips of Gadot's assertive responses began circulating, shared and reshared across platforms, each play magnifying the intensity of the moment and framing it in ways both supportive and critical. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Fan forums erupted in debate, and entertainment news outlets scrambled to analyze the segment. The narration emphasized the velocity and scale of the reaction. In today's digital age, a single moment captured on live television can ignite conversations worldwide within moments. What might have been a private exchange in another era became an instant global event, dissected, debated, and broadcast across every conceivable channel. Screenshots of tweets, Instagram stories, and YouTube reaction videos flashed across the screen, each one offering a unique perspective. Some lauding Gadot for standing her ground, others critiquing her tone, and many simply marveling at the rare glimpse of unfiltered emotion from a celebrity known for grace and composure. Journalists and media analysts seized upon the footage, replaying it with slow-motion effects and commentary, framing it as a pivotal cultural moment. Morning shows, late-night programs, and entertainment news segments featured clips of the exchange, each offering interpretations, debates, and speculation. The narration highlighted the relentless scrutiny. For Gal Gadot, an actress whose career has been defined by professionalism and poise, the segment became a microcosm of the pressures that accompany celebrity life, the need to maintain an image while navigating the unpredictable currents of public perception. Fan reactions painted a divided landscape. Social media users debated not just the content of Gadot's responses, but the tone, body language, and unspoken tension she conveyed. Comments ranged from supportive praising her confidence, assertiveness, and refusal to be undermined to critical, questioning whether she had allowed frustration to overshadow the purpose of the interview. This multiplicity of reactions underscored a central truth of modern fame. In an era dominated by virality and instant commentary, the public often becomes both spectator and judge, interpreting every micro-expression and subtle pause as a reflection. Of Character. Entertainment commentators dissected the interview frame by frame, noting Gadot's micro-expressions, her deliberate hand gestures, and her nuanced vocal inflections. Experts in media and psychology weighed in, explaining how live television creates a pressure cooker, environment where even seasoned professionals can display fleeting signs of frustration or assertiveness. A narration emphasized these insights. Live broadcasts magnify human emotion. The proximity of cameras, the immediacy of the audience, and the permanence of recorded footage transform what might be a routine exchange into a defining moment of authenticity or perceived confrontation. The discussion extended beyond Gadot herself, touching on the dynamics of celebrity interviews in general. Viewers were reminded of the delicate balance hosts must maintain: curiosity without intrusion, engagement without provocation. Strahan's role was dissected, his professionalism acknowledged, yet the subtle probing that had elicited Gadot's firm responses was analyzed as a calculated test of composure. The narration framed this as an inevitable component of modern media. The interplay between host and guest is a complex dance, where every question carries weight, and every answer is scrutinized under the relentless gaze of a global audience. Media outlets contrasted this moment with Gadot's previous interviews, highlighting her consistency in maintaining grace under pressure, and her occasional, rare instances of assertiveness. The commentary created a narrative arc, situating the GMA segment within her broader public persona while simultaneously elevating it as a singular moment of human authenticity. Clips of prior interviews, award shows, and press tours interspersed, with the GMA footage offered context, showing viewers how exceptional this interaction truly was.